2026, the demand for electricity in the U.S. is going to outpace the supply of it, right? They're not necessarily going to be able to get all the power that they want or that they need from the grid. They're going to have to most likely puzzle piece it together.
And there will be a point where it's easier to do it yourself. It's cheaper to do it yourself than it is to go to the public utility.
Greg, you're leading our renewable effort,
Yes.
and you come from a battery background where you're exposed to a lot of different renewable projects, and
Yes. Yep.
you're kind of I would say kind of a thought leader in the renewable space, like as it relates to the equipment that we sell. And I know you've only been on board here at Zang for a while, but you've been in the battery market for 5 years. You bring a ton of experience, a lot of great ideas. Are you surprised, now that you've kind of gotten settled here at Zang, are you surprised at the demand for electrical equipment, particularly for renewable projects in upstate New York?
I am. I'm really surprised, especially with the change, right, with ITC credits, right, and just how that landscape's changing. Just to see the continued demand for solar. Right, not just solar, but battery projects too, right? We're getting into those here at Zang, and it's very, very exciting to see because it's a technology that's not going away.
Tell me, what does that credit mean? Who's offering that credit, and why is that a driver of what we're seeing in the market?
Yeah, so over the past 5-7 years, right, we've seen tax credits applied to solar sites. So, right, you're getting pretty much tax rebates on solar panels, inverters, transformers, right? Really the whole scope of the project. Right, and over the past couple of years, that has changed. So really the 4th of July this year is a big date when some of those BABA and ITC requirements change. So we're not getting those discounts. Mm-hmm. But regardless, the project financials for a lot of these renewable efforts, right, are so great that the demand really hasn't changed.
Do you foresee that, even after July 4th of this year, do you expect that the demand is going to change? Or is it going to stay steady, or is it too early to say?
I think really the demand will just increase, regardless of the changes, because, right, we talk about, we're working on data centers as well, right? And just the sheer amount of energy that those consume and the speed at which they're being brought online. There's not supply and demand, right? The laws of supply and demand. So, yeah, demand is only going to increase, and it's one of the fastest ways to get generation online. Right?
Yeah, and to that point, the thought leaders in the industry, like globally, are talking about in 2026, the demand for electricity in the U.S. is going to outpace the supply of it, right?
Yeah.
So, I think to your point, there's no reason why we wouldn't continue to see renewables grow, and the demand for the equipment that we sell into that space will also grow. Now, is renewables going to be the answer for the supply of electrical for the grid in the U.S.?
Not entirely, no.
Right.
And I think maybe that's a big drawback that some people see, right, is because, for example, with solar, right, you're not generating at midnight.
Right.
Right? Or with wind, there's not always wind, right? But that's why you need to have a diversified generation stance. Right, and we're seeing that across. Again, we've got renewable customers, we've got our data center customers, right? Some of them that are bringing in gas, right? Gas turbines to power their plants.
So it's definitely a piece of the puzzle.
Oh, yeah.
But it's not the solution as a standalone entity, if you will.
100%,
right?
yeah.
What about, at Zang here, what are some of the things that we can help, solar developers with, right? There's a lot of great people in that space, and they're looking for help. They're looking for somebody to partner with them, to give them advice, to share our past experience with them. Let's speak to that a little bit, and what is some of the uniqueness that you think that Zang brings to that space?
Yeah, well, right off the bat, is just our relationships with our vendors, right? And all the different manufacturers that we have, right? We can pull people directly from the factory who are making the different components,
Yeah.
bring them into calls, right? And say, okay, we like this, we want to change this, right? Have we thought about this, right? So we can optimize it.
Yeah, and what a huge advantage, right? To
Massive.
take the guy who's designing the switchgear and who probably started on the shop floor, by the way, and made his way up through engineering,
yeah.
and now might be the lead engineer guy, and we can pull him on a phone call to help a customer solve like a very custom, very particular problem.
Yes.
Huge advantage. What a value for the customer, right? To be able
certainly.
to do that, right?
Certainly, and that's, I mean, even the niceness, right, of some of these, I'll say, cutting edge projects, right, getting into DC switchgear, right, where we're seeing that even come up on some of the projects that we're bidding and working on. So yeah, it's very exciting to have those relationships and drive business further.
Yeah, and you bring up another like interesting talking point, like DC switchgear. We're starting to see curiosity around that, and even some like inquiries about for DC gear. Where does that fit into the puzzle? What is that going to do for the industry, and how do you think it might change it?
Yeah, well, DC, right, is power on demand, really, right? So batteries are all DC, right? So as we see localized generation, that's a term we'll become more familiar with, right? You can generate on-site, store it on-site, deliver it on-site, right? And when you have to convert it from AC to DC, back to AC, right? Every time you have to manipulate the energy, there's an energy loss there.
Sure.
So the DC is going to be a major advantage, right, when you get into the millions of kilowatt hours a year, right, for like an industrial site, et cetera.
So connect the dots for me. You talk about on-site generation, which you said that's a term we're going to get more and more familiar with.
Yeah.
Connect the dots between that, batteries and DC switchgear, and like how do those things all fit together?
Yeah, right. So for example, I could bring solar in, right? I'll say it's really easy for the renewables to relate to. Solar's generated in DC, right? You take pretty much the sun rays, hits a solar panel, you get it into pretty much a microinverter, right, into a DC combiner box. So you step up the voltage, right, and then you can feed all of those combiner boxes to a main switchboard, right, or disconnects to a switchboard, right, and then just continue that chain up. But as we get into the multiple megawatt size of these projects and they're dedicated to one customer, if you want to store it on site, you can only store in DC. Right? So you don't want to have to convert from DC to AC to DC to AC, right? Because even if it's a 2% loss through one transition, if you've got 3 or 4 plus transitions, right, now you're talking 8% loss, 10% loss, right, which is tens of thousands of dollars a year.
Sure, and I think like as the U.S. market and particularly the renewable market, as we continue to evolve this technology, if you will, and understand how to get the most out of it and drive the most efficiencies, the DC is coming into play because we're taking some of the inefficiencies out of the equation, like you stated.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, and it's just right. I'll say most customers look at their utility bill and they're saying, okay, it's 20 cents a kilowatt hour last year. Now it's 21 cents this year. Oh, it's a penny different. Well, if you've got 65 million kilowatt hours in a year, right, that's what? A difference of $650,000 difference in 1 year?
Right.
Like, that's a massive change.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You start scaling that, talking about some of these larger sites, it's a lot of dollars and a lot of loss that, could potentially be saved.
Yeah, well, it just comes back to overhead, right? And, I guess you get more into the project financials, right? But as an owner, right, you also get to reap some of those tax benefits, right? Depending how you write that. So,
talk to me about like products, products that Zang sells, into that space, like what are some of the things that like we're good at and we can help some of these solar developers out with?
Yeah, I mean, funny to say that. I think there's actually a lot that we do very well. Right, so I see simple overhead that we stock, like GoAbs. That's something that I'll say is just a consistent flow of business. That's why we stock so many.
Right.
Right, but I'll say getting more into the nitty gritty of switchboards, transformers, right, and even switchgear, right. So, I'll say again, circuit protection, and understanding, right, the different utilities or different grid requirements here in the state, right. And helping customers navigate that, because the solar landscape really is so new. So helping them work with the utilities, right, by bringing the right vendors and just making that path as smooth as possible.
Yeah, one thing that I've observed over the past 10 years as like particularly solar has like become more and more mainstream, and we've seen more and more solar development. One of the things that I think the manufacturing community, like the manufacturers of products, they've gone through a learning experience, if you will. There's nuances within the solar space, and you have to tweak your designs for the application, right? So like particularly, I know like with pad mount transformers, if you roll back 10 years ago, there was a lot of leaking transformers, there was transformer failures, and it was no fault necessarily of the pad mount manufacturers. It's just that it was a new application for them, and they didn't understand the stress in the nuances of the solar environment, in what it was going to do to the transformer. So not to get caught in the weeds on that topic, but I think what we're seeing now is a lot of those manufacturers have gone through the learning curve. They've figured out what they need to do in the design of their equipment, and the equipment that is coming out now to support the solar market, whether it's transformers or even switchboards. I think the learning curve is a lot of these manufacturers are through it, and we're seeing like a more robust, more solar-centric portfolio of products that hit the market now. And so again, I think we're just seeing a lot fewer failures and a lot fewer concerns or issues when equipment hits the site. Because I mean, if you've been on solar sites, I mean, when you get out onto a solar site, there's no time to be lost. Like every minute counts. There is a very hard and fast deadline that the developers are trying to meet, and we don't have time to, or they don't have time to be troubleshooting issues in the field. And the other thing about solar sites is they're usually very remote. It's not easy to get to them, and it's not easy to get equipment to them. So like, if equipment, after waiting for a year for that equipment to arrive, if there's issues with it, we don't want to be in a situation where we're asking our customers to then put that equipment back on a truck and send it back to a manufacturing facility for repairs. So I think with all that said, the summary there is a lot of the manufacturers that we work with have been serving the solar market for a decade. They've been through the learning curve. They worked out the kinks. And again, we're seeing a lot fewer issues when we ship switchboards and transformers out to the solar fields now. And again, your experience, right, is a little bit, more than mine, right? But I see that as well. Just the projects, the scopes have become more consistent. Yes.
Right? As again, that side of the industry has been more spec'd in, if you will. Right. And so it just, helps the manufacturers out, and thankfully we've got a good stable up.
Yeah, well, I can say, I've really wanted to lean into the renewable market for years now. But from to be honest, from a bandwidth standpoint, we've just not been positioned to really go after that business and really serve that market the way that I wanted Zang to do it. But the market is asking for it. They're asking for people who have 80 plus years of experience to come alongside them, help them, point them in the right direction, and partner with them. And I'm excited that you're on board now, because I feel like we're finally in a position where we can we can go after that business and serve that market. And I'm excited to see what comes of it.
Oh yeah, I'm excited too, and I haven't told you this. I actually got a referral last night as well. So like whatever, I think I was putting the kids down and got an email from somebody else, and they said, "Oh, you're working with this group in the industry. Hey, like they referred us to you. Can you help us?" Right? These are examples of the transformers, grounding transformers that we've worked with.
That's awesome.
So I didn't tell you that. But,
I mean that's our best marketing strategy, right? Just word of mouth. I mean, you do an excellent job for a customer. You serve them. You go above and beyond, and I mean, for sure, they're gonna tell their friends, right?
Oh yeah.
And that's exactly what we want to see happening. So, Greg, in the renewable market, there's different types of generation. There's technologies that like we're gonna see coming online that aren't mainstream yet, and then there's like all the ancillary kind of equipment and infrastructure that sort of supports the renewable market. You know, you've got storage, and you know, you could even talk a little bit about electric vehicles. You know, that all kind of fits into that same conversation. So, I mean, just walk us through like, you know, the different generation technologies and that ancillary kind of like support system that like all packages together for that renewable market.
Yeah. So, I mean, renewable generation, right? I mean, we're really talking about solar, wind, right? You know, I've seen markets, right, where there's even underwater turbines, right, like taking the energy off of waves, even buoys. I've seen stuff like that, right? Biofuel, hydrogen, right? Those are all conversations that we're in and familiar with. But outside of generation, right, you know, we're talking about battery energy storage. That's, you know, I'll say your different lithium chemistries, you know, sodium ion, that's something else, solid state batteries, vanadium flow, iron air batteries. You know, I've seen some data centers recently with big deals for those. Right, so a lot of different storage technologies. Cutting edge are really these that I need to learn more about are these solid state transformers.
Yeah.
Right, seeing those again, talking about efficiency earlier in this conversation, those are extremely efficient in converting AC immediately to DC and being a transformer. So
give us the 101 on that, because I wonder if like has the market even really heard of this? I mean, I hadn't even really heard of it until recently myself, and so like, you know, it's a newer emerging technology. Like, what's the thought behind it? Like, where is it going to help the industry?
Yeah, well, I mean, really where it's going to help the industry is with efficiencies, right? Because when you're taking, again, AC current off of the grid, right? There's different grid voltages, right? But when you're stepping it down, right, you've got, I'll say all your circuit protection, right, is, I'll say one phase you've got to put it through, one phase of equipment. But then you have to go through a transformer, at least one, right? And then if you've got feeders, right, there's more from there. And if you need to convert it to DC, then you're putting it through a power conditioning system or an inverter, right? And then you're pretty much splitting it out from there, right? My understanding, which is I'll say very limited on these solid-state transformers, is that pretty much you can plug in the AC side from one end, and then it's going to output DC, right, through a series of switches, relays, and controls, right, that are all instantaneous.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting to see like how that type of technology that like people have really been, there's nothing new there about that. It's technology that people have been talking about for decades. It's interesting to see it actually like becoming like prototyped now, and funding is going into these companies, right? And it'll be interesting to see like what is the speed to market with like a technology like that, right? Mm-hmm. And I think like the electrical industry is a perfect example of like just, I don't know if stagnant is the right word, because it almost has a negative connotation, but I'll say like not much has changed, right?
No.
Like the technology hasn't changed, you know, but I think we're sitting in a very unique place and time right now, and we talked about it earlier, where you know, in 2026, it's predicted that the demand for power is going to outpace the supply of power. So, you know, it's going to be interesting to see how new technologies like that which are old ideas that are being brought to a reality now.
Yeah.
And you talked about like the different battery technologies, and batteries have evolved like significantly over the past 10 years as like, that battery market got ready for like EVs and other applications, and now storage. And it's going to be really interesting to see the pace at which the technology evolves to serve the market, because the market demands that the technology evolves.
Yeah, it does, and I think part of the answer, and we're working on projects right now. I mean, I've got stuff I've got to get out today for it, but right where we're seeing, right, traditionally, generation peaks during the day and it slows down at night, right? But what we're seeing is projects with battery storage, right, where folks are buying energy at night and then supplying the grid during the day, right, because there's that demand, right, the extra demand on the grid. So we're seeing a lot of that. We're going to see a lot more of that, because I think that's also a rapid response type of action, right, versus building, we hear a lot about nuke, right, or gas plant, stuff like that. That takes years.
Right.
Right. Batteries, right, 3 to 6 months lead time typically, and they come pretty much pre-assembled. You can just drop them in place. They're typically qualified already with the PCS, as well as like an EMS, stuff like that. So you can just kind of plug and play, and then say, all right, I need you to collect energy at this time. I need you to push it at this time.
Yeah, I think you touched on like another like great topic there, and we talked a lot about renewables and how they're like a piece of the puzzle to solve our energy crisis. And I think some of the things that we can do in the short term while these power generation avenues ramp up, you're talking about nuclear, that's going to take time. Solar is going to continue to get more and more efficient as it scales, but in the short term, it was something you were talking about really is just like efficiency of what we do have, right? And that's a piece of the puzzle to solve part of our energy crisis that we're in right now, right? So I think, we've kind of just, grown up, if you will, in an era or an environment where we didn't need to be super concerned about energy consumption. There was plenty of it, and it was relatively cheap. But as the demand for it goes up, the price is going up, and efficiency for owners, developers, campuses, large-scale infrastructure, like they're going to have to be very cognizant of the efficiency of the power that they do have, right? So we're going to see a lot of metering and monitoring. I believe that will scale, and I think you are absolutely correct. We're going to see a lot more peak shaving coming online, which means a lot more storage. So again, I think a really good, interesting conversation just about the renewable market, energy crisis, and it's going to be exciting to see how the technology evolves to meet what the market needs right now.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and and I guess circling back on this too, I actually forgot a couple of key renewable markets, right, that exist, and that's geothermal. Yeah. Right. I mean, there's some really large geothermal plants out there that I've had previous encounters with, right. So there's that, but then there's also linear generators. So there's Mainspring Energy. Okay. They're out of California. Okay. And then there's Hyliion, their Carno product line, right, which, again, they're still testing. I know that they've got some, I'll say, high-profile tests undergoing, right, that are pretty tight to their chest. But, I mean, that's distributed generation, I think 250 kW is a building block, but that's going to lead to a lot of behind the meter, right? So some folks shifting away from the utility. Right, where they're just going to generate when they need to generate, they're going to store it when they need to store it, and they're going to deliver it when they're going to need it to be delivered. Yeah. It's what are they saying now? It's a microgrid, DERs, right? Distributed energy resources.
Yeah,
But
we're moving towards like a BYOP kind of environment. Bring your own
Yeah.
power, right?
Yeah,
And
no,
so,
exactly.
like, if companies are going to want to scale, whether it's manufacturing, data centers, they're not necessarily going to be able to get all the power that they want or that they need from the grid. They're going to
Yeah.
have to most likely puzzle piece it together, and some of that is going to be peak shaving efforts, storage efforts, but also some of these other generation technologies that we're talking about.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think again, it's going to be exciting to watch it unfold over the next few years, and also figuring out how we can take the offering that Zang has and like how we can kind of bring that to the market in the context of all these new technologies, right? And there's going to be a learning curve there, but we're watching this now. We're keeping a pulse on it, and we're doing what we can to educate ourselves to be ready for it when it's here.
Yeah. Well, and I think, right, part of that is right, it is here in a way, not on a mass scale, I'll say, right? But I really see Zang as being a liaison, right, for really a plethora of companies, of customers, right, just to help them get familiarized. Because, if I were to ask many people in the area, all right, do you have an energy strategy? Have you ever thought about that? A lot of people are going to say, what are you talking about, Greg?
Right.
All right, what is energy strategy? I just get from the grid.
Right.
But that's not always going to be an option. Again, data centers are the first to that. But I think as we zero in on some of these manufacturing technologies or generation technologies, right, that are being met with domestic manufacturing, we're just going to see costs driven down, and there will be a point where it's easier to do it yourself. It's cheaper to do it yourself than it is to go to the public utility. Yeah. Nothing against them,
right?
But it's just the laws of supply and demand and the sheer amount of cable that would need to be run overhead. I mean, getting the, I'll say the labor force for that, it would be insurmountable.
Yeah, it's not doable. Yeah, I love what you said there. Like, yeah, and I do think that is kind of part of Zang's role in the equation of the industry, right? Is like I feel like we have a responsibility not to just sell people transformers and switchgear, but we have a responsibility to educate. So we need to go learn while the learning can be done, and bring those ideas and those thoughts back to the market and help inform like our customer base who count on us daily and weekly to support their projects. We need to let them know what's coming and give them opportunities for training and insight into what's coming, so that when it's here, they're ready and we're ready to support them. So, yeah, it's gonna be great. It's gonna be exciting and interesting. Lots of changes. I've been in this business for 27 years almost. Not much has changed, but now all of a sudden a lot's changing, and it's exciting. So, yeah, hey, thanks again for taking the time out of your day just to chat about this. It's been great.